I'm Jeff Bond, and welcome to the Steward Chair, our show about how great leaders build enduring companies that leave a lasting legacy. We believe that leadership isn't about ownership, it's about stewardship. So whether you started your own company or have been entrusted to lead it, we want to help you be a better steward of the people, the mission, and the future that you create through this show. And so the only favor we'll ever ask of you is that you follow this podcast wherever you listen. Thank you. Today's guest is someone I have long admired as a model of what conscious people-first leadership looks like in practice, especially at scale. Curtis Hite is the CEO and co-founder of Improving, a global IT services firm with over 2,000 employees across North and South America, India, and beyond. With over $250 million in annual revenue, Improving is not only a force in software development, consulting, and digital transformation, it's also a standard bearer for conscious capitalism, earning over 100 Best Places to Work awards across many of its offices. Curtis's leadership is grounded in 4 powerful values, which we discuss in the episode: excellence, dedication, involvement, and trust. He's pioneered a culture rooted in otherish behavior, thinking of others more without thinking less of yourself, and a commitment to building lifelong relationships inside and outside of business. Under his guidance, Improving has completed more than a dozen strategic acquisitions, while sustaining a culture so strong that it's become a competitive advantage. Curtis also models a rhythm of intentionality, taking a solo personal retreat every 90 days that we get into, and encouraging his executive team to lead with clarity, conviction, and love. This episode explores what it takes to steward not just a company, but a deeply human culture through global growth, market uncertainty, and the daily decisions that shape legacy. Let's jump in. Curtis Hite, welcome to the Steward Chair.
I'm glad to be here.
You know, I've really admired viewing your leadership from afar through conscious capitalism and seeing how you embody its 4 tenets, but particularly how attuned you are to people first practices and stakeholder orientation through your business. And you've scaled it to a really large size. And I just thank you for your gift of time and sharing your wisdom today.
Hopefully we'll be here and sharing more with others. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what a gift that is. I want to start just with a simple kind of exchange of our definition of stewardship, because I think that's a really important thing to understand what that evokes in leaders that we have on this show. So for us, we view it as a long-term responsibility of a leader to care for what's been entrusted to them, whether that's people, a mission, or a company. It's not for personal gain, but the flourishing of others and the health of future generations. It is a temporary role. We belong to the chair doesn't belong to us. So when I say the word stewardship in the context of business leadership, what thoughts does that evoke in your mind, Curtis?
A very similar definition. I think there are a lot of people that want positions and roles of, let's say, authority to have power or to have influence, or because they think that it will give them more financial gain. But quite frankly, I view all of those in the terms of stewardship as a responsibility, as you've said. And it's quite a heavy responsibility, because the more that I feel we are given, the more is expected of us. And often we can fall short in our own expectations as a lot is given to us. Maybe a few of the nuances that I might slightly disagree with is stewardship is not just long term. I believe it is both the short term, which is what most people actually might focus on, and the long term, right, without forgetting. And the others is it actually can be very unhealthy to only focus on others. The selfless behavior is actually in many books been questioned or even proven to be destructive if it's completely selfless. So at Improving, we have a value of dedication, and we kind of define that as thinking of others a little bit more without thinking less of yourself. It's this common uh, not tension, but it's working together of these two things while keeping the otherish behavior actually in focus and slightly prioritized over self.
I love that. And clearly you've thought about that. And that comes with the humility and the responsibility of leadership. And you've grown quite a large organization. So just to give our listeners a little bit of a context of what you're leading today, what is the scope and the size of the company? And I know you're spread out across at least North America and maybe some other places now.
Yeah, so improving is roughly 2,000 employees. And up until last October, we were North America. We were Mexico, the United States, and Canada. But 6 months ago, we began our global strategy. Actually, I guess it's 8 now. In October, we expanded into Argentina and Chile. And then just recently in April, we expanded into India. So we're truly a global organization right now. We're focused on modern digital services, a lot of artificial intelligence, modern data, and application modernization.
Well, incredible growth. Congratulations on the global expansion. Well deserved as well. And on top of that, frequently receiving a best place to work recognition. And, there's all these cultural nuances that come into play when you start expanding globally and having a global mindset. I'm interested in understanding how your leadership principles as a values driven leader have helped guide you in this rapid growth and building a strong culture while you're at it.
Yeah, culture is work. A lot of companies try to make culture about words or trying to find um, some trite sayings that they put up on a wall or in a pamphlet somewhere. But the reality is, if you're going to drive culture, you have to reinforce it over and over. To some people, they don't see a huge amount of value in that. Even some of our own employees. I remember being on a town hall. One of our employees asked, "Are we going to have to hear about the culture every?" Town hall meeting, and the answer is yeah, we are going to hear about culture because that's how culture becomes pervasive. In our three values, you heard me talk about one, dedication, but our other two are excellence. Excellence is not an occasional act, it is a consistent habit. And then also involvement, which is evolving into engagement, but involvement. Our tagline around that is that our success over all these years is a consequence of our collective involvement, no single individual. We are a team and we play different roles and we're going to be successful as a team. We don't want the star player that disrupts the entire organization. We want to come together as one unit. And so we emphasize these three values. There are different practices to do so. They hear about them on our town halls, or we have these daily stand ups in certain offices where they will lift up employees and using those same terms and using their version of those sentences. They don't have to be exactly the same. How do you lift somebody up? And when people hear about these things over and over, because we have deliberate practice on a weekly basis. Our fourth value is trust, and maybe I'm most proud of this one. It's the biggest one to live into. And we believe that trust is central to not only our professional relationships and professional success, but our personal ones, whether they're inside the company or in our personal lives. And we are big fans of Stephen Covey's Speed of Trust. We activate around this inside the company. We have more than 1,100 people that are participating in trust pods on a weekly basis, discussing the four cores and the 13 behaviors. And we're doing this voluntarily on a weekly basis. This is how you make pervasive your culture pervasive. And I think one last thing, and I know I'm going long, but it's super important to me, is when you state values like that, our three core values plus our aspirational value, the one that we will never be perfect into of building trust, right? But that is expectations of the employees. We expect these things of every employee at the company. But there's a second question that most companies miss. And that question is, what can the employees expect of the company? And we consider these are 5 commitments. They're all around one thing. We are going to create a great place to work. A few things, not the perfect place, because we can always think of some things that are better. But as a steward of this business, and we have so many people that are pouring 40, 50 hours of work, maybe more a week into improving. What is our responsibility to these employees? And those 5 commitments are: the first, to create an environment which fosters lifelong personal and professional relationships, relationships that transcend just the workplace. The second is open and honest communication. We have town halls, we share our financials, we are as transparent as we can responsibly be. The third is sharing in the success of the company. And this is what employees can expect. We have, when we can afford it, we have profit share. That doesn't mean that profit share is guaranteed. No, we have to reach certain levels. We have a very shared ownership model. More than 200 of our employees, even though we are private and private equity held, actually have ownership in the business. And we share in the accolades. The fourth one is creative ways to learn and grow. And final is a positive and a fun atmosphere, right? Nobody ever enjoyed, if we asked this question at least 1,000 times in our improving universities and educational programs, who are your favorite executives you've ever worked for? And if you're an executive and you find yourself predominantly negative, I can tell you, you're going to be nobody's favorite. Never. You won't even elevate there. So that's why we want it to be positive and fun. Those are our commitments to the employees. And if you want to be an executive in the company, you must also not only commit to the values, but commit to these commitments to our employees.
That's an incredible reflection, and really, I know that everyone's going to listen back on that and write all those commitments down. I know that means a lot to me. In capitalism, traditionally in the past, it was very extractionary. It was all about performance and what you can get out of people. Now people have millions of choices of where they work every day, particularly in the field of software and solutions and technology. And you're proving success within your culture, but it stems from this baseline of values. And I love what you said about it being an ongoing short-term responsibility every single day, that it requires you to talk about it at each of your town halls. And the outcome long-term is the result of that. So I think that's a really important point to hone in on. Has that thinking ever evolved for you from the time that you decided to start being a leader in business to where it is today? And tell me a little bit about that evolution.
In many ways. First of all, it has evolved within the improving business. When it came to our 3 core values, we went through a long exercise. I won't go into this, but it was open ended with all employees. And we came together, and in the end, we settled on 8 different things that we thought we were. These are the 8 values we thought that improving represented. We then put those 8 values in front of our stakeholders. So our customer are, besides the employees, because the employees already decided on 8. And of those 8, it was very, very consistent that our customers, our suppliers, the industry viewed us as being very involved in everything we do, our engagement, being very dedicated, having this otherish behavior, and then finally air and commitment to excellence. So they chose our values. That's why we call them our identity. That's who we are. And then the trust one came later on. So these things evolve over time, and even the commitments to our employees rather than expectations from the employees. You would see in a very extensive ecosystem of values and culture. And it doesn't, and we add it one small piece at a time. Too many people try to get a very big picture of culture all at once. We started with those 3 key identity values. It evolved and added that aspirational value. Then it evolved and we included trust. Then it evolved, we have something called Come Together, where each of the offices come together on a single topic in the month. It will be overwhelming if you try to do everything, but we have 17 years where we slowly added these habits And so a recommendation: start small, don't start big. You might have a big picture, but start small and commit to a short time period. We're doing this for 6 months. If it doesn't work, we'll change it. That way you don't say we're committing forever and then you don't commit because it didn't work. No, we're committing for 6 months. And if it doesn't work, we change. And eventually 6 months might become 12 months, 4 years, 5 years, and then it's forever. Another evolution came between companies. You learn things from your previous companies. My last business was acquired by a French organization, and one of the biggest lessons we learned there is not to overimpose a centralized culture into another organization. France is very, very different than, let's say, Dallas, Texas, and I mean very different. Okay, and if it's too heavy-handed, then things won't work. Instead, what we do is we create this framework. We said, here's the high-level guiding principles. Here's what we mean by it: otherish behavior, not self-oriented, right? How are you living into that? And each of these enterprises locations, the culture has to be within that framework.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you about that because of the cultural nuance of now having this global mindset. I mean, even in North America, now expanding into India and Chile and all these other places that you were talking about, very vastly different cultural contexts, and so much of how you do work is culturally influenced. So when you're thinking about acquiring these companies and merging your culture, what are some of the specific things you're doing as you're vetting that to ensure that that's even possible in the first place?
Most of our conversations when we're acquiring organizations begin with culture, because we're going to find a lot of organizations that might meet our financial criteria of right, our size or growth or whatever criteria we've set. What becomes more rare is the cultural alignment, and we have to make sure we have a fair degree, because that makes integration much easier. What we've also found is, even though we're bigger, we actually have stronger culture than most of the smaller companies. That is true as long as they have a we, not a me mentality. Some companies become best places to work because they give everything their employees ask. That's an interesting concept, because that's a me mentality. That's a me. What are you doing for me? Even if it's worded as, "What are you doing for us?" Right? Switch the question. If I'm an otherish behavior, I'm not thinking, what are you doing for us or me? I'm thinking, what am I doing for you? Or am I doing for the group? Right? Whose action? And so these things are what we look at. And we do know the difference. We've had acquisitions in the past that are more me focused than we focused. And that's our involvement value. So this cultural alignment is actually more important to understanding the success of the future than to look backwards uh, and then the financials. Sorry about that, but yes, the
Yeah.
culture is central.
That's so reflective of who you are. For those who don't know, this concept of stakeholder orientation, the fact that you even included your customers, your employees, and everybody in the decision on values. Oftentimes that happens at a leadership retreat, right? It's the board getting together, the leadership team, the executives getting together, and then trying to drip that down throughout the organization and get everybody to adopt it and love it. And it almost always falls flat when you do it that way. But because you've been so inclusive and you have this we mentality, I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, that this has become a strategic advantage for your business.
I do. One of the reasons, right, when the employees decided eight, but then our stakeholders decided which three of the eight, right? That really describes who you are. And is it easier to get alignment with who you really are or who you want to be? A lot of people, we just make a distinction inside of improving, the difference between being sincere and being serious. I think almost everybody has come with a New Year's resolution, losing weight or exercising, where they're very sincere. They really mean it. But then very few actually accomplish it. That's being serious about it. Okay. And I think that when you select values in a vacuum, you end up with people being very sincere. I wish we were this. When we did it with our stakeholders, we weren't wishing we were this. We were told we were this. And when you say you're this, then we rally behind what we actually are versus who we want to be. The one aspirational value, which we can never fully live into, is trust. And that's why we only have one aspirational value, and the other three are our identity.
Yeah. And it insinuates that that's something that you have to work on every single day, to your point, that short term obligation that you have to one another.
That's right.
Yeah. Love that. You've led improving through major disruptions. We're in what a lot of people would say an uncertain time today, from the financial crisis, the recent downturn in tech. How have you stewarded your business and your people through these seasons of uncertainty? And I think this is something top of mind with executive leaders today.
Yeah, there's a number of ways to do this. First, I'm going to give a context of how I view this. I was leading organizations on an executive team back during the .com. This is not the Great Recession, which for technology businesses was much easier. This was not COVID, which was a blip, right? This was not some just temporary pullback. This is kind of the environment we're finding ourselves as a once in a 20-year environment, just like the .com. We had all the stimulus that happened post COVID, and it in 21, 22 for a huge demand. But then that kind of tailed off, and we're paying for that right now. So that's the time frame. 20 years .com. This is what I'm liking it to. And I think as we try to navigate these situations, a few things come to mind. Organizations need to respond, not react to different environments. We need to look at the big picture, and we do need to respond, but not just emotionally react to things. Slow down, become objective, seek guidance from others. That's part of being a good steward, is not just acting on the whim. And and emotional topics. This is just going to be unless your purpose aligns around certain divisive topics, do not get involved. Do not activate. It is not the responsible of a business to activate around some concept that is not aligned with its business or its core values. If it is, then you can choose. Okay, but that creates divisiveness within, and we've done a good job of navigating that, keeping everything we activate around that's aligned, and that helps us navigate these challenging environments along with this we mentality, and it's much easier to face challenges or a challenging environment when you're a team than when you're about a lot of people that are me's. And a lot of the me people will filter out of an organization during difficult times. And while we have lifelong relationships, sometimes that's maybe the silver lining as you become more of a team
Mm.
in these extended difficult times.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word there. And so, I'm curious, what are some of the things that you do personally to make sure that you're getting the advisory, the support from other CEOs, founders, mentors, uh, getting the rest you need? What are some of the things that you do to make sure that you're taken care of as a leader, so that you can bring this we mentality to the business?
Okay, I'll bang this out in succession. There's a lot of things. I'm part of a large number of professional groups like YPO and like Tiger 21, and where I actually get peers that are in a very similar group that we share. In fact, today after this, I'll be driving to a YPO forum where we have 9 CEOs that get together, discuss their businesses, hold each other accountable. It's a fantastic organization. That actually is a huge source. Another one is we have external board members that, and we just expanded it. By 2 members so that we're getting additional information. I'm going to then talk about the executives and the employees, right? That's a key stakeholder. Are we listening to what the vast majority and it's and are we really taking it to heart? And most of the time, we're really good about this, but it doesn't mean we react or respond instead of respond. So, do we take the time to listen to these employee surveys, ask questions of the other people in the organization that have a say, and maybe even listen to some of the chatter to find the truth through it? Listen first is a trust behavior, and it overlaps with a lot of the other trust behaviors, like demonstrating respect or clarifying expectations. There's a lot of overlap, but listening first, it does go a long way.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and it sounds like you do a lot of leadership development yourself, which is such a gift to those you're leading. And I know how deeply you believe in stewarding other stewards and developing other leaders. How are you building kind of that continuity and that long-term plan for the business so that it's always led well with your values intact? Because it doesn't seem like your growth is slowing down. And, that's quite the responsibility to make sure that it's left in good hands. And given that we're not guaranteed tomorrow, what are some of the things that you're doing to ensure that leadership continuity is there?
Um, we are not guaranteed tomorrow. That is a true aspect, and constantly having some attention. I personally take a personal retreat every 90 days by myself, and I go off and I'm reflecting on things both on the personal level and the professional level. And when I do focus on the professional, I'm thinking 10 and 20 years out. And even having that picture of where we are as an organization are 20 years out, where I am 20 years, that forces you to then move it to a 5-year vision and move it to a 1-year vision, and have constantly have actions that are leading towards those. This allows us to respond and to have actually a plan. And while it might not be a straight line to a destination, you're always moving at least some direction towards that destination. We develop leaders in the same way, trying to encourage them to do it. And we have everything from improving university to a more senior 13-week class, which is the integral business program, to 2-year executive programs that, in fact, was just on a conference call this morning about to kick off another 2-year program for some senior execs. We are constantly in motion trying to keep others developing and growing, always in alignment with our values.
I really like the concept too of your 90-day solitude retreat too, because you are so inclusive. You have all of your stakeholders around you helping with the decision making. You're listening and applying that into the decisions that you're making as a leader. But how important is, like, what is the ROI of that rest? That time of self reflection and kind of shutting down the distractions. And maybe what does that look like as we're talking to other leaders here on the show?
Um, it's intense, and it's not just R&R, and it is every 90 days. I've been doing this for more than a decade now. It is probably the single most important activity I do any quarter. First of all, when you have a mentality of, like, our dedication, thinking of others a little bit more without thinking less of ourselves, I tend to go a little bit further on the others than the self, and that can be draining. When I first started taking these retreats, I felt selfish. Why? Because, you know what? I'd eat what I wanted. I'd actually eat when I wanted. I would take a break when I wanted, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm being so selfish. What that actually let me learn is how much I'm actually thinking of others. Because right now, we eat where my kid wants, or where my fiance wants, or and we eat when they want, and we watch the TV shows that they want. And right, or the same thing happens with employees. This event is transformative, and I used to do it once a year. Now it's every 90 days, and it starts off on a Friday, and I do deep reflection, and I'm also a spiritual person, so there's a spiritual component. But I choose one topic in my life. I call this life book. And it might be professional, it might be love, might be immediate family, it might be learning and growth, it might be health, it might be finance. Okay, there are 10 of these. And I look at it from a 20-year vision, a 5-year vision, a 1-year set of goals, a 90 day set of goals. And then I define weekly activities every week, calling it the walk, the talk, that allows me to live. So I'm always in motion. It's very intentional and deliberate. And it ensures I'm not wandering aimlessly, that I don't find myself 1 year from now in the same place I started. It is the most important thing I do in my life. And those around me benefit: my kids, my fiance, my extended family, our employees.
That's incredible. I mean, I'm going to be applying some of that. Is that something that you learned from somebody else or something that you've just started and kind of evolved over time?
It was inspired. I was in one of these YPO meetings, and it was
Mm,
inspired by somebody that did an event around love. And that's one of the areas in a concept called Lifebook, which I believe is a company out of Chicago. And it was inspired by that. And I'm like, this is incredible. But if you have literally 10, 20-year visions in your life, so it's not just one, each area kind of detailed out. And then you have 5-year objectives and these 1 year. And I revisit it every Monday morning it's about an hour activity. I take small baby steps in so many areas, but after a year, two, three, a decade, you would not imagine how wonderful of a life and how intentional it is and how your kids benefit because, right, things like as simple as a date night. I know this is very personal, just went on one for 4 years. I wanted to do something intentional in that area of my life. And I wanted to become closer and talk. And I had a set of objectives. That is a common weekly practice now. I have similar things with my children or with employees or social friends. It allows you to live a very mindful life that's driven by direction, even though you might need to change that direction at times.
that's beautiful, Curtis. I believe that we were created out of love, that it's at the essence of who we are. And I think there's a strong place for love in business that's often misunderstood and not talked about enough. So thank you for sharing that. We're coming up on time, and this time has gone by so quickly for me, and I know it has for our listeners too. And we are about stewarding stewards. We bring on CEOs, president, founders so that we can serve current and future CEOs, presidents, founders in their journey of leadership. If you're a listener right now and you've heard our conversation, what is something that we haven't discussed or that you wish I asked that you would like to leave with them?
Yeah. I would say right now, and it's in a climate, is to be open-minded, to just take the time to listen and be non-divisive. There are so many things that we can come together as people and agree upon, and somehow too many of our conversations today, whether they're in the workplace or where they're outside, become what I call righteous, and people think they have the right answer. And I just want to, no matter what your side you are on a political topic or a spiritual topic or a work topic, um, being right all the time is a very arrogant concept. It's arrogance. I'm right. I own the answer to this. Suspend that and love people more. Be known for your love, be known for your acceptance of others more than the righteousness of your own opinions. And if we can do that as a people, just as a collective, we become stronger. We're going to have our differences, but try to do this. And I know if you're in the U.S. at least, you see this polarization. Why? We don't need to. Suspend your own. Be open to somebody that disagrees with you, even on a passionate topic. Their experience in life has been different. So is yours. Kind of respect that.
That's just a super small example of that is just the truth that you spoke into the definition of stewardship at the top of this episode. And, just so appreciate the gift that you shared with us today, Curtis. Thanks for coming on the Steward Chair.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Steward Chair. If today's conversation inspired you, we'd be grateful if you'd follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by Chat with Leaders Media and End of the Line Productions, a collaboration committed to helping leaders steward their influence with purpose and impact. Our production team is Quentin Thomas, executive producer, Thomas Mastrototoro, associate producer, Daniel Mastrototoro, managing editor, and me, Jeff Bond, your creative director, host, and research lead. Until next time, go be a leader worth following.